ideal. And so I think there needs to be a different restoration and a different way of looking at what to do once this relationship breaks down, and going to court is not a good way. Having, I think, methods or interventions within the hospital community itself is probably ideal to try and fix, because essentially you're fixing this relationship that is breaking down rather than going into tort or looking for the courts to fix it, because it actually just ends up making it worse. So that's all I have to say.
Audience regarding this topic. You can use the mic over here or there.
A very good morning, happy to all speakers. My name is Jira. I'm a third-year law student in the Faculty of Law. I'd like to ask about particularly an idea when we talk about how doctor-patient relationships should be based on trust and confidence, right? So I'm bringing your attention to the doctor-patient confidentiality rule, and I want to ask any of your opinions, maybe all of you, on how mandatory reporting laws when it comes to child abuse and gunshot wounds jeopardizes this position of doctor-patient confidentiality. And also, where do you draw the line, like where do you start infringing upon the doctor-patient confidentiality, and what are the sort of things that needed for you to breach this sort of thing? And also, when it comes to domestic violence, why isn't there a mandatory reporting law? Because it's also involving the element of abuse. Is this because there's an adult involved in this situation? So, two things, does mandatory reporting law necessarily breaches the patient-doctor confidentiality? And how do you assess and where do you draw the line when it comes to breaching this?
To the panelists, which would like to respond to the question? Thank you.
I works now. Where do you draw the line? Actually, I don't know where to draw the line. That's the honest truth. You see, you cannot hide it. The lawyers are here. I think you cannot be a party of hiding a crime. You can't. I don't think so. So as far as the doctor is concerned, if there's violence or gunshot wound, he takes the history, he records it down in the notes, you just record it down in the notes, and that's where it stops. If it comes a criminal case, then the notes are taken up, and you just read the notes in the court. That's what you can do. Now, the people, the forensic or the lawyers will tell you, you don't have to take down the history. This patient came, it was a gunshot wound by his son or what they did. The other thing you can do is for the doctor is just do the physical examination. That is one way of getting around it if you felt. Only write down what you found on examination. The history, if you write down on the notes, he tells the whole story, then it can get into problems. I know I'm not answering the question, but that's the difficult line to draw. If you don't take down the history of the gunshot wound or where it done, are you now party to suppressing a crime? I am not sure about that.
I was wondering whether I should say I have the right to remain silent. I must say, over the years, I had been asked by doctors questions about confidentiality. Now, the doctor-patient relationship is a relationship in which the doctor owes a legal and ethical duty of confidentiality to the patient. But that matter is not, may I put it this way, so there are exceptions to the duty of confidentiality. Now, confidentiality and privilege must be distinguished. Privilege is a rule of evidence that something can be withheld from the court or from a litigant. But confidentiality is a larger concept, that you owe the duty of confidentiality against the whole world. But when it comes to a court of law, there's something different. I'll come to that in a moment. Now, what are the usual exceptions to the duty of confidentiality? One is if the patient gives consent. Consent must come from the patient, not from, say, her son-in-law. Once that's what happened to a doctor whom I was advising, found. Son-in-law purported to give consent. I told him that's not valid. If she is a married woman of sound mind, etc., her husband cannot give consent. Because one of the first things we learned, in fact in first year, was this idea that a woman, when married, remains a separate legal person. At one time, it was a law in England that when a man and woman got married, they became one. And that one was the man. Not anymore. So, consent must come from the patient. Of course, if the patient is mentally incapacitated or is a minor, then you may say consent should come from the guardian. But something which will complicate the picture. What about the mature minor? The Gillick competent minor? I'm sure some of you would have heard of the Gillick case. I had a case once, of a 17-year-old Muslim girl who was in a hospital, and obstetrician and gynecologist was attending to her, and she had herpes, apparently sexually transmitted. And she refused to allow the obstetrician to tell her parents. Her parents wanted to know. My advice to the obstetrician was respect her wishes, that she was mature minor, competent. I don't accept that the age of majority is the age of consent. Just look at the penal code. A girl of 16 can give consent to sexual intercourse. Do you, if you want to sleep with a 17-year-old girl, go and ask her father, sir, can I have consent to sleep with your daughter? No. Let's move on. So, there can be other exceptions. A legal duty to disclose. We have got the Child Act, mandatory reporting for the purpose of protecting children. I haven't looked at the Domestic Violence Act, Very rarely, in recent years anyway, has a woman come to me complaining that she's been beaten up by her husband. Maybe it's happening the other way around. Yes, when we were first year students, we heard of a case in 1963. Young police inspector in Ipoh later became a senior police officer. During a quarrel with his wife, they had been just married for a few months, he slapped her. To his great surprise, she slapped him back.
Wow.
That's not the end of the story. He phoned his mother to ask her what to do. Probably his mother told him, I found you the right girl, right? So anyway, I don't know about the Domestic Violence Act, whether there is a mandatory duty to report. Now, but the doctor is also a member of the community. Please keep that in mind. That the doctor, certainly if questioned by the police when investigating a case, has a legal duty to answer questions put to him. The police can take away the medical records. A welfare authority can come and take away the medical records as a protector of a child.